Welcome back to Excel. This is a Mental Evolution podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Seth Rose, where we talk all things mental performance, sports psychology, and really try to break down practical ways that athletes, coaches, and high performers can use things in their day-to-day. So today's episode is a little personal. I wanted to share some practical evidence-based tools that I've helped develop over the time of my PhD program. And it's centered around this idea of sport well-being. And what we did is we actually created two tools that were designed to answer a question of how can we actually measure and build well-being in competitive environments. So we know that we're constantly told to take care of ourselves, and you can't perform unless you're well. And there's a lot of talks about mental health right now, and for very good reason, right? The other thing is that we actually know that when we have high levels of well-being, we can thrive better in our personal lives and our competitive lives. We can also have better team effectiveness if the individuals within that team are well. And so we can kind of try to say and hypothesize that higher levels of well-being can help with higher levels of performance. And so there's a lot of ways to measure well-being out there, and it usually comes from the general psychology literature. But they're not really taking into context the training environment, the competition, or team environments. And so they don't actually capture the highs and lows that come with the uniqueness of competition, the team dynamics, the pressure to perform, or maybe there's a loss of identity after an injury, or just the physical training aspect. So our team set out to build a model and a set of tools to capture a holistic approach to well-being. That's physical, mental, and social. So not just their quality of life or their happiness scores. So we built this model based off of previous research done in the sport well-being literature, and it integrates both this idea of life satisfaction and feeling good, which is kind of some old school well-being stuff called hedonic well-being. And then we also integrated in some of the newer thriving and flourishing and optimal functioning and functioning well, which is called eudaimonic well-being. And so that means that we're just not asking, are you happy in your sport? But we're asking things like, are you growing in your sport? Are you connected? Are you building positive relationships? Are you recovering well? Are you free from illness? Are you aligned with your values? And so it's this difference that we're trying to both feel good and do good on and off the field. And so I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of everything, but I do want to cover what holistic well-being looks like, and then thinking about in your world, what areas are you experiencing highs or lows in, and then that can maybe help you just bring more awareness to ways to round out your well-being. And so, like I had mentioned before, we looked at it in a holistic way. So when we look at subjective well-being, so this is how satisfied you are, how energized you might feel, how are you happy? The traditional well-being things that you have. So these would be considered more outcome-based well-being components in your sport. And then look at social well-being, right? Are you feeling supported? Do you feel connected with your people? Do you feel trusted? And then physical well-being. Physical well-being is really important because if we have lower physical health and illness, that often presents, some functional limitations that can drastically reduce your mood and your sport or performance satisfaction. And so physical well-being looks at, are you staying healthy? Are you recovering well? Are you fueled properly? Are you sleeping, right? Those components matter to your well-being. And then lastly, we looked at ways to enhance well-being through more eudaimonic well-being components. And so we looked at accountability. Are you taking ownership in your performance, and are you holding yourself accountable to that? We looked at positive relationships. So not just the do you feel supported, but are you actually building those things? We looked at values and how your values, and when they're aligned with what you do in your sport, that we know can drive a lot of things like motivation and enjoyment and satisfaction and just those outcome-based well-being measures. And then lastly, growth. As I mentioned earlier, like are you growing in your sport? And that's really important, and that matters, so that way you don't feel stagnant. So think of it this way. We have some measures that tell us where you're at, and then we also looked at some ways to figure out how to get better. And so I'll be following up. I think this warrants another episode. But when we're looking at holistic well-being, let's try to take a look at some of those factors to help with our well-being, to potentially help with our performance, and then vice versa. And if anybody's interested in, reading some of the nitty-gritty research or anything like that, feel free to let me know. But thanks for sticking around this longer one. Obviously, this is something that I'm passionate about, and spent a lot of time going into the weeds about. So I'll dedicate some more episodes to looking at more practical ways for you to take from this research. Okay, thanks for sticking around on this one. We'll catch you on the next one.